Welcome to the Mystical Truths Podcast. This is Rebecca, and I'm really glad you're here. Let's unlock your world. We all go through rough stuff, and many of us have had periods when it just keeps coming and coming and coming. It can be really hard to keep your head above turbulent waters. And at some point, I think you find yourself asking all of creation, why? Like, how can I make it through this? But somehow we do. There just seems to be something within us that gets us through another day and another, and we make it through. I've asked a friend to talk with me here today and share the turbulent events of her life over the past few years or so. And her story will not only blow your mind, but it will touch your heart. My guest today is Sandy DeMonte. Hi, Sandy. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm really glad to have you, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Sandy and I grew up in the same small town, and we were great friends, and we really let the good times roll in high school. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
After graduation, we, along with our friend Patty, went to medical training together, and then work and family and life in general just got busy, and we drifted apart. And the three of us earlier this year reconnected, and after our little reunion, I kept thinking of how the details of Sandy's world over the past few years could really help other people. So before we get into your riveting story, Sandy, I want to make two important points here. One is that in the top 5 of my most listened to podcast episodes are Calming Your Mind, which is number 1, Connecting with the Other Side, and Why We Die the Way We Do. And we're going to touch on each one of those in one way or another as we go forward, because they're all really important. I mean, those are important, I think, to most people is, how do I stay calm? How do I get through stuff? What about the other side? And why do we die the way we do? Because it's never a coincidence. It's never
Absolutely
a mistake. The other point I want to make is that it's often not helpful to look backwards. However, when we look into the past and find the honey, it's not only helpful, but it can be a guiding light for others. So that's why I'm okay with us looking backwards. And I really, I can't wait to get to the sort of mic-dropping kind of honey that you found in the funeral home.
Absolutely.
But we won't spoil it. We won't get into that until it's time. So take us to when your happy life started to turn.
Well, within a matter of a span of 2 years, I lost my mother unexpectedly. And then I lost an aunt and an uncle. And then I lost my father. And the day that we buried my father, my brother passed away. So I just felt like it just was keeping coming. Then my son was in a accident. He was out of state and crossing a street and was hit by a car and was life-flighted to a military hospital and then life-flighted to a trauma center. I went down to, of course, be with my son, and while I was down there, my husband passed away. So I felt like my whole world was just crashing.
Oh, yeah. And so your mom dies, some other relatives die.
Yes.
You have a big family, by the way, several siblings.
Yes.
And some drama.
Yes.
I'm sure that all families have. So there's that in there as well. And then your dad passed, which created some more drama, I'm assuming, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And your brother, who is younger than you.
Yes, my little brother.
Was at the funeral. What happened right before he passed? What was going on?
We had just left my aunt's because we had all gone to my aunt's house for dinner. My brother and I were extremely close. He was at my house every day. it was like I had two husbands, my brother
Hmm.
and my husband. And my husband and my brother were close too. When I was at work, them two would be outside waxing cars and just sitting and bullshitting until I would get off work. And my husband would tease my brother and call him my Miss Daisy because he would take me wherever I had to go. What happened was we had left my aunt's, and he wanted to go to the casino to relax. And he said, "Hey, let's go down to relax for a little bit." And I said, "Okay, let me go home and grab some clothes," because I had been staying with my brother. He lived with my father, and I had been staying with him since my father had passed. And he was like, "No, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be fine." He said, "You go home. You get ready." Said, "I will call you at 7. And if you don't hear from me, you call me." So it was 7 o'clock, and I called him, and he didn't answer. And that was very unusual. And I just had this feeling. I can't explain it to anybody. Ran out of the house. My son happened to be going down to the laundromat to do clothes. And I said, I can't get a hold of Richie. I can't get a hold of Richie. And my father lived 3 streets over from me. So I ran over. I opened the door, and I was calling for my brother. And he didn't answer. And I went into his bedroom. He was taking a nap. I screamed for his name, and he didn't answer. And I started doing CPR on him. My son, who happened to be down in the town that we live in, said he got this feeling, and he just came to my dad's. And he was like, "I just knew something had happened." So unfortunately, CPR did not work, and my brother passed away.
Do you think he was already passed before you got there?
When I got there, I felt like he had not fully passed, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because he still had some color to his face. I just kept saying, "Richie, please, you can't do this to me. Like, I can't lose you." And, I kept doing the CPR, and of course, the ambulance and everybody was coming. And to be honest with you, that's kind of all I remember.
Yeah.
I remember my son coming to me and looking at me, and he was like, "Mom, Richie, he's no longer with us." And that's all, honestly, that I remember.
I do my best to help all of us not take life too seriously, especially death. However, that's a big change for you, especially because you were
Yes.
so close to him, and around him so often. So it's just something
Yes.
you're very used to. And then in one moment, that's not ever going to be the same again. Right? I believe that they're all still with us and a part of our lives, but not in that same way.
I agree 100%. Like my brother and I, we would talk about death, honestly.
Good.
And, he wasn't afraid to die.
Nice.
He always said that he felt like he was going to die young. He had contracted COVID, and we didn't think he was going to make it, but he did. And, we were all like, "Wow, this is amazing," But he suffered a lot. Like, he had bad lungs from it. And, he struggled with the after effects from it.
And so COVID wasn't his means of exit, and that timing wasn't his timing, but then he did meet his means of exit and his timing. And so
Yes.
You went from that to, how long was it before the next event? That was your son's accident next, right?
Yes. It was, I would say not even 6 months.
You were handling his affairs, your brother's affairs after his death, so you had that going on, right?
I did. And I was also handling my father's.
And your dad's, yeah, right.
So I was, trying to handle my father's. I was trying to handle my brother's. And I'll never forget, my husband and I, we were going out to eat. And my daughter called me and she says, Mom, and I just said, what happened? And she was like, Mom, and I just knew, I had this feeling. And she was like, was hit by a car crossing the street. And he's been life flighted.
And we're in Pennsylvania. He was where?
He was in North Carolina.
North Carolina. So, shocker. I mean, and at that point you knew he'd been hit and life flighted, but that's not a lot of detail. It's startling detail.
Right.
So what happened then?
Well, of course, my daughter tried to get us a plane out. In the meantime, I was trying to talk to the police and everybody to see if they could give me any information. Was he breathing? Was he, okay? Of course, nobody could. He was life flighted to a military facility, and that's where I thought that I was going to that hospital. And so I called, couldn't get no information. Once he was, I guess the word I want to use is they felt safe enough that he could be life flighted. He was life flighted to a trauma center. So, I wasn't even sure where he was. A good friend of his who was raised with him picked me up and drove me to see him because we couldn't get no flights out until the next day, which there was no way I was going to wait. I don't blame you.
And that's a long drive.
Yes.
So thankfully one of his best friends was able to drive you down, and you went straight through, I'm assuming.
Yes, we did. And on the way down there, I was praying to my brother, and I said to my brother, please, I cannot lose my son. I can't. I don't think I will be able to handle it. I just can't. And next thing I know, we're down there, and I'll never forget walking in that hospital room and seeing him lay there. I completely fell apart. I went up to him and I said, son, I'm here. And of course, he was completely out of it. I said, Mom's here and you're going to be okay. So I was asking him, can you squeeze Mom's hand? Can you wiggle your toes? The doctors kept taking him back. The way that trauma works, they say they start from the worst to the least. So he had to go in and he had a pelvis operation, a back operation. He had a broken arm, his knees. He was pretty much broke from the neck down.
Why from the neck down only? I mean, that kind of a car accident, shouldn't his head have been damaged?
This is something that I tell everybody, and I believe this with all my heart. When I was talking to my son, I said to him, son, you're going to be okay. And he whispered to me, Mom, Uncle Richie said, hell no. And he put his belly around my head.
Which I love because there's so much information in that.
Yes. And my brother, you have to understand, he had a big belly. And, we would always tease him about it because when he would laugh, of course his belly would jiggle. And when he said that to me, I just had the hairs on my arms were just standing up. And I said to the doctors, in the meantime, the doctors kept taking him back for CT scans and MRIs on his brain. And I finally said to one of the doctors, I said, you're lying to me. My son has brain damage and you just don't want to tell me this. And I'll never forget that doctor looked at me and he said, no. He said, it's like he's broke from the neck down. And we just keep checking to make sure there's no bleeding on the brain. I was just like, wow. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Because what are the chances, when you're hit that hard, and you said he flew like 7 feet into the air?
Yes, he was not in a vehicle. He was actually crossing a street
And a vehicle hit him.
when the car hit him. Yes.
And so I love that your brother, or the soul that was your brother, used humor, I think, to get a message across. Because in my awareness, nobody stops the train of death. It's just something that plays out beautifully and is well synchronized, whether we agree with it or not, or like it or not.
Right.
And so it clearly was not your son's day to die. It was his day for an accident, though, which we call an accident, but there's no such thing as an accident. There's the stuff of life. And you asking your brother and just saying, like, this can't happen, gave him a perfect opportunity.
Yes.
To put his sort of belly in there as a buffer.
Yes.
When really what's happening is your son's head was shielded from the
Absolutely.
the force of the whole accident, and your brother chose, and your son saw it in that way of your brother's belly, because he had a big belly, right? And that's funny.
Yes.
Because wouldn't we think that would be a nice buffer between the pavement or wherever his head hit and his head?
Yes.
To put somebody's belly in there and to say, like, oh, hell no, like, this is not going to happen, and put that little buffer in there. I just think that was as beautiful as everything is that comes from the other side, because they love to help us take the seriousness out of what's really happening. And I think that was a point, and it also fits your brother, because he was just a fun guy.
Yes. Anybody that knew my brother was, he was like the ray of sunshine. He could make anybody laugh. Mm-hmm. That's, that was his character. And we say that all the time. He loved jokes, loved to play jokes, loved Snapchat. He was just a funny person.
And so that fits him perfectly. It was a good message for all of you.
Yes.
And your son doesn't remember even saying that, right?
He does not. I remember a couple months later when he had come home. He was in the hospital, I believe it was like 54 days.
Wow.
And he came home. He was in a wheelchair, of course, couldn't walk. But I remember sitting on the porch. I was telling him, we were talking, and I said, I don't think you realize how serious your accident was. And I told him about what he had told me, and he did not remember, and he actually teared up. Mm. He was like, wow. And he does remember, he told me that heaven's a beautiful place. He said it's very vibrant and beautiful.
Interesting. So he saw it.
He saw it.
He experienced it. He just it wasn't his time to fully transition.
Yes.
But it was his time for life to change for him and for all of you, really. And so with all of the broken bones and just the extreme damage that was done to his entire body from the neck down, with all of that, he's up and walking today.
He is.
And when I came to your birthday party, it had been a long time since we saw each other. And I was with Patty, and I said, that's Sandy's son, isn't it? And she said, yeah, that's him. And I said, well, how is he walking around? Isn't that, I'm just trying to put two and two together. And she said, yeah, that's him. And I said, I would never have known if I didn't know that happened.
Yes.
I would never have known that that's the same guy that was so broken and damaged. But yet here he is walking around like seemingly normal. I'm sure he's still going through some physical healing and stuff like that, but it was just incredible. And so it just goes to show you that no matter what comes at us, there's honey in everything. We can be okay. We always have the potential to be okay, whether we die or live. And the body is an amazing machine that can be repaired and can repair itself. And, your son's walking proof of that.
Absolutely. I say every day, like, wow, this is like amazing. like I said, he had, he's still enduring surgeries.
Mm.
He is currently, he just had both shoulders done. He has to go back in to do an ACL. He's like the walking miracle is what I say.
And it's no coincidence either that he got a glimpse of the other side, because I'm sure that helped him through his recovery and is still helping him. But it also helps all of you get some further understanding about where your husband is now. Right?
Yes.
So you're was it North Carolina?
North Carolina.
You're in North Carolina, you're helping your son, and what happened with your husband?
I was down there. I was going on day 8, and I was going to come home and surprise my husband. In the meantime, my husband was insistent. He was like, I don't want you to come home. Your son needs you. I'm fine. You just stay down there. I don't care, what it costs. I'll never forget this. I had just talked to him 2 hours prior, and I just left the hospital. We were going out to eat, and we had just finished dinner, and my phone rings, and it's my daughter, and she was just hysterical. And I kept saying, what is wrong? And she said, it's Dad. So my husband had a heart attack and did not make it.
So now here you go again. You're states away.
Yes.
And luckily you were planning on coming back, so your mind was already in that direction. But now you had to come back.
I did. And I will be honest with you, I don't even remember coming home.
Mm.
My son has wonderful friends, and there was several of his friends down there, and one of the girls that had come down to see him got me and her a plane ticket, and she got me on a plane and brought me back. My cousin had picked me up from the airport, and I said, I want to go see my husband. So she had called the funeral home, and the funeral home was like, oh, well, he's not ready, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, my cousin goes, I understand that, but told her the circumstances. And he was like, oh, no problem. So she took me to the funeral home, and I walked into the room, and there he was laying. And I went over to him, and I looked at him, and I'll never forget this. I looked at him and I said, oh my God, you shaved. And you have to know my husband. My husband only shaved on special occasions. I loved his beard. I called him Grizzly Adams. And the funeral director was like, oh, I didn't shave him. I didn't do that. And I was like, no, I'm not saying that you did it. I'm saying my husband only shaved on special occasions.
That's incredible.
So
that's incredible. And that's a mic drop kind of a thing, isn't it?
It is. And I was just so, like, it took me back. And I was like, wow, did he know? And of course, still so many things are going through my mind. But the more that I look back and I think of things, I'm like, wow, I think he was telling me.
Mm-hmm. Without knowing it.
Right.
We often, or I should say people often, have some not very conscious guidance that is just perfectly timed, perfectly fitting to make sure that this transition happens in a way that has information in it, that's good for everybody. And like you said, he wouldn't have shaved just because you were coming home. He wouldn't have shaved to go out to dinner. He didn't shave unless it was a very special occasion, like a wedding, right?
Absolutely. A funny story is when my oldest daughter got married, the night before we went for the rehearsal dinner. Of course, my husband wasn't shaved up. And the next day we go to the wedding, and the lady that was assisting with the wedding said to my husband, well, who are you? And he said, well, that's my daughter. And she was like, wow, you clean up pretty nice. And so that was a special occasion for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Something in him just had to shave.
Yes, absolutely.
And he probably didn't have any idea why he was shaving.
Nope.
Because as far as he knew, nothing that spectacular was coming up. I mean, your son wasn't coming home. It wasn't that. So I think that it's the little things like that that have the biggest messages for us. That he probably didn't consciously know he was going to pass, but something in him shaved.
Yes.
And I find this so often, that these little bits of honey, these little things of information are there just like hints for us so that something in us can remember we're not ever doing this alone. And it's not ever out of order. It's not always necessarily easy. But didn't that help you like you said you had to see him. Like you were so fried at this point because of everything that had been going on. Because here you are with your son, but you still have estates to take care of and things like that. So there's still life. And then this happens with your husband. You're just sort of at the end of your rope at that point.
Yes.
All of creation knew that.
Yes.
All of creation made sure that these little signs were in there, because when you looked at him and saw he shaved, I bet you felt relief.
I did. I just was totally taken back.
Because it's such a big thing. Like you can't deny that, like he didn't shave for any other reason ever than something really, really big. And so something in him knew that something big was coming.
Yes.
And didn't you say that he had a conversation? A friend of yours told you afterward that your husband, was it the day before or a couple days before he passed, showed him where he wanted some guns to go to?
Yes. My husband loved to take guns apart, fix them, clean them. And a good friend of ours had been at the house the night before. And, they were sitting there talking, and we have a room, what we call the gun room, per se. And he said he took me up there and showed me everything and was like, this one goes to this grandchild, this one goes to this grandchild, and was naming each of the grandchildren and what was supposed to go to them.
Just ironically, which there's no coincidence.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when he told me that, I just was like so taken back. I just was like, wow, why would he, do this? Why would he show him this and make sure that the kids get these?
And I think it shows how intuitive we all are, and we don't realize it, because I'm sure he was guided. Something in him was queuing all of that up without his conscious thought about it. Queuing up a conversation with this friend and showing him, this gun goes to this kid, this one goes to this one, and then shaving, and just these things that are so perfectly synchronized and full of meaning need to be looked at, need to be paid attention to, because that's what helps us understand and believe that there's more to all of us than what we see in this everyday life that we're in. And that the stuff of life doesn't happen by accident. It's not like things are meant to be. At least not like people think anyway. We are meant to come in to have a life because we chose to. We're meant to leave when we leave because that's part of what we design for ourselves. In my belief, we decide to come into an incarnation. We decide the particulars of the people we'll be associated with. We sort of all plan this out to an extent, but not down to the very last detail. We know the mile markers. We also know the focus of what we're coming in, like how we want to expand in this life, and what would be good scenarios for that. What kind of personality would be helpful? What type of body? All that kind of stuff. And then we have this free will. So we get to do this any way we want to, but there are going to be those mile markers that are going to synchronize up. And then because of what we're experiencing here and how we perceive it and the thoughts we have about it, everything is being intermingled, like synchronized beautifully. If we would just stand back and look at it from like a bird's eye view, or they look through the eyes of Source, look at it from a broader perspective, we can see the things that are in there to help us through.
Yes.
Because without some of the things that you talked about, it would have been so much more difficult for you and confusing.
And, a lot of people said to me, like, how did you get through it? How are you getting through it?
Mm-hmm.
I look back and I say, we're never promised tomorrow. I just look back and see so many different things and say, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So that's one of the main reasons why I do this podcast, because I've learned to not take life so seriously and to not take death seriously and to look for the good stuff that's there. And that's why I like to call it the honey, because honey is sweet and it's precious, because this planet doesn't survive without bees who make the honey. They make the good stuff. It's just sprinkled everywhere, but for the most part, we've been taught to fall apart when things happen in a way we don't want them to happen, or we think isn't a good experience.
I think too, and I tell everybody this, it's a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
It's how you watch TV, how you cook. It's a whole lifestyle change too.
It is. And we came here for that variety. That's the nice part about it. We didn't come here to have same, live forever, nothing changes. We would be bored with that. And there's no real expansion that comes from that. In order for eternity to be eternal, we have to be thinking new thoughts. We have to be having new experiences. Things have to change. And life shows us that our whole entire lives. We see pets come and go. We see flowers come and go. We see all kinds of change happening and things dying off and renewing and back and forth. And that's supposed to help us get used to the fact that our lives are going to change and that people are going to come and go. We are going to come and go. And the more we understand that and just relax about it, then we will be able to see a broader view of what's really going on, because we could look at what your son went through, and I'm sure people around you said, that's a tragedy. That has to be hard for you. How are you getting through this? Will you survive this? Which really doesn't help us, because that puts more seriousness into it. It sort of reinforces the terribleness of it. I get why people say those things, but it's just what we've been conditioned to say and to do, instead of saying, wow, like that is a big change. What's next? How's it going? What does it look like? Where is the good stuff in it? Because that it's not like life looked at your son one day and said, well, let's just have a car hit him and, break up his body a lot. And let's just see how he does with that. It's not that. It's not that he did anything wrong that caused that. It's just that we come here for the variety, and we come here for the things that make us dig deep, because that's where we get our best experiential learning and understanding from. Because you're all different now because of all of that.
Yes.
And didn't all of that bring you inward more?
Absolutely.
Doesn't it make you find yourself and understand some things about life? I mean, for sure, now that your brother's alive, your husband's alive. They're not the men that you knew here, but they're the souls who had that role while they were here, that you are very connected with and you can continue to be connected with. And you also know that your son is not only okay, he's not the same as he was before the accident, not physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, or anything else. He's changed in all of those ways since that day.
Yes.
And that's a really, really good thing. From a soul's perspective, we're okay that the body gets broken, because we're not the body. And we know the body knows how to rejuvenate itself and repair and heal itself. and that we have operations here that can assist in that. So we're not afraid for the body. We're not saying those things shouldn't happen. From a soul perspective, we're getting the honey from that stuff. We know that we're digging deep. We know that that kind of contrast is helping us to expand and to question life even more, which is great. Because when your mom and your uncles, aunts, whatever, your brother, your husband, when they die, doesn't it make you think, are they really still alive? Or have we all just been saying that?
Yes.
So there's that. And then you get these little bits of information that help you. It's not like the other side comes and burns a bush for us to illuminate the fact that life continues on. What they do is they sprinkle little things along our way. I call them breadcrumbs. If we pick up the breadcrumbs, then we understand a little bit more. We trust a little more. We fear a little less. And every circumstance like this has big opportunity for us to learn to trust the divine nature of life and the divine order of life. Because we've been convinced that things should go the way we think they should go, and when they don't, something's wrong. And that's not true. Things are always in a beautiful divine order.
It's kind of funny because yesterday my son sent me a little chat, and he was like, the song Ellen Jackson, When Daddy Let Me Drive, had come on the radio. And kind of like a funny story, but my husband had an older car, and when my son was like 12 or 13, would take him up to RIDC Park and let him sit and drive. And we used to chuckle about that. And so he was like, oh, Mom, Dad's saying hello to me today. He said, I wanted to show you what just came over the radio. He said, I was sitting here thinking about Dad, and he just sent me a sign telling me he's saying hello to me.
Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes when we think about them, it's because they were thinking about us first. Or they're sending their thoughts in our direction at that time. Because it's a fun game for them. It's a fun interaction to slip a little bit of something through a little crack of non-resistance that we have in that moment. To just say, yeah, I'm right here. I'm right here. And people say to me, can you tell them that I love them? Or can you tell them that I said this or I said that? And I always say, I don't have to tell them. You just did. You did before the words came out of your mouth. They're not invading our privacy. It's a whole different outlook from the other side. But they're very aware of our thoughts. They know where our heart is. They know what our struggles are. They know what our limitations are. They know what our potentials are. And so they're guiding us through all of this with that understanding. And it's completely unconditional love. You know, in one of the podcast episodes in the beginning, I used an analogy of this life is like we're in this big, giant living maze. And everything's changing in the maze all the time. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people, a lot of stuff. And when you're in a maze, you can't see it all. So let's say you're in this maze of life and you're making your way through it, but you have a whole slew of people that you love, that you trust 1,000,000%. You know that what they say you can go by. They have a bird's eye view. They can see the whole maze. They see what everybody else is up to. They see what's around the corners. They see the opportunities and the obstacles. And they are giving you, say it's a game show, right? They're giving you some clues about when to go quicker, when to sit down, when to bend over and tie your shoe because something's going to fly right in front of you. And they're far away. Like you can hear them, but they're kind of far. And so it works out really well when you're real little. Your mind's not too busy. You're not distracted too much out there. So you hear them very well. Watch kids. They navigate very well. And then over time, we become more distracted with the maze. Now we're more focused with the maze and what's happening in the maze, what everybody else is doing in the maze, what they might not be doing, what they think. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out. We think we're doing this alone. Now it really seems like we're doing it alone because the more we do that, the less we can hear that guidance. We tune it out without realizing we're doing it because we're so busy in our mind and so distracted with figuring out the maze. If we would just relax and not take life so seriously and not try to figure this life out, we would get those impulses that make you show your friend your guns and who you want to get those guns without even knowing it, right? It's the guidance that has you just decide you want to shave when you don't really know why you're shaving. Probably don't even think about it. You just shave. It's that kind of stuff that we think are our own thoughts.
Here's another little thing that happened to me. My daughter had moved out of her place that my husband and I had owned. So, we were painting. Me and my girlfriend were down there painting, and my son had some friends help me do, things that just needed to be done before I could get the place ready. I was down in the basement, and my girlfriend come down, and she was like, "Hey, did your husband call you Pumpkin Doodle?" And I looked at her, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, "Here." And she handed me a note that has to be, I've been with my husband since I was 20. Wow. So the note has to be 25 years old, 30. I read the note, and basically it just said, there's a frozen mug in the freezer for you. You can have a beer, but leave me one for the football game. Now, I was so taken back because for 2 days I had been down there, painting and just doing all this physical labor. And I was like, wow. So I had called my son and I said, "You're not going to believe this." Now, mind you, we never lived in that house. The cupboard that the note was found in, my husband did not build. So how did the note get there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if it was written all those years ago, somebody's lived in that place since then, right? Or during that period of time.
Right.
So if it was just randomly in the cupboard, somebody would have seen it and tossed it or whatever.
And that's what I had called my son, and I told him, and he was like, "Mom," he goes, "I cleaned out that cupboard. There was nothing in that cupboard." And I was like, "I'm telling you, this is where she found the note." And he was like, "Dad's just telling you to take it easy."
Yep, have a beer.
Yep, have a beer.
And this is child's play for them. This is easy stuff. We look at it and go, that is incredible. It's a little miracle that something like that could happen, that the note could just be there all of a sudden in really good timing, Yeah. And they always tell us, like, we do that all day long, every day. Like, that's not, just pay attention. Get easy about this stuff. The higher we are vibrationally, like, in other words, the more ease we feel, or the more happy we are, the more calm we are, the more playful we are, the more curious we are. That's where we're going to be available to that stuff. That's how we can pick up on the things that are being offered all day long.
Yes.
Guidance isn't something that comes in spurts. Guidance is always streaming. The other side, all of creation, source, always streaming, always attentive, always seeing the bigger picture, and very willing to prod us along the way. They never tell us what to do or what not to do. And they don't tell us definitely what's going to happen and what's not going to happen for the most part, because we have the freedom to change things. That's why they guide us to, this might be a good idea for you. Consider this, or look at this. This will help you understand that I'm still alive. This will help you. This will just reinforce, just one more little thing to reinforce that I'm still here. I'm still playing. If you play too, then we both can interact better. And so people may think I'm loony when I talk to animals or birds or when I thank my mother for something who is no longer physical, or whatever, when I'm just looking at a tree and loving this tree. People might think I'm loony for that. And that's fine. That's okay, because I know for sure inside myself that everything is alive and communicating. Signs don't just come from a note or, things like that. They come from experiences. They come from insects and, just these things that we think I just happen to look at that billboard right now. That happens to me all the time, where I'll just happen to turn my head and I see something that has a meaning for me or a message for me. Why did I just happen to turn my head in that moment and look exactly where I looked? Because that's how guidance works. So
Right.
You see how the easier we are about it, the more we get in the flow with it. Because they're not pushing us to look at anything or to pick up a note. They're just like they do with, just like the birds. If you think of birds, they just fly together. Like, look at the geese, like they just fly in formation. Because the guidance just is there. It's available for them to interpret and then interact in that way. They're not thinking and planning with each other who's going to be at which part of that formation. It's just something that they're flowing in the direction of and the understanding of. And we can do that too. The thing that trips us up is we're logical thinkers. And we're more complicated thinkers, which is great. I mean, that was the design. But it doesn't mean that we can't see guidance when it's right there or feel it, because it's not always an item you can pick up. Sometimes it's a sensation or a thought that comes through. So it's always there. But the thing I encourage people about, when somebody passes that's close to you, do the best you can to honor the fact that that person's journey here in the physical is done. That's a wonderful thing. Keep them alive in your life, but don't keep them overly alive in your life, because there's a reason why you're still here going on physically and they're going on non-physically. No different than, like, for instance, for us, being very close friends and being a big part of each other's lives, and then not for quite a while.
Right.
And now again, right? We sync up, because when it fits, it fits. When it has purpose for both parties or many parties, then it just does. And when it's not serving us to be here physically, it's not serving anybody else either for us to be here physically. And that's why we leave when we leave, because there is a greater sort of undercurrent to all of this stuff. There's a greater expansion that's happening here for everything and everybody. And we don't have all the details to it while we're in the physical. So we pay attention. We remember that, we're in this big changing maze. And if anytime we can, on purpose, calm ourselves down, find a way to center ourselves, bring our attention back to where our awareness is, and maybe even just sit in silence for a minute or a second even, that helps. When we look for the honey, when we give up the decision that this is a bad thing and that this should really be tearing me apart, when we stop doing that.
I think too, for our own selfish reasons, and I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms, but, we want that person here physically.
Sure.
Like I said, I cook different. I watch TV different. Yeah. I pay my bills different. It's a lifestyle change.
Yeah. And this is your time for that. Because the way it was with the both of you here is finished. It doesn't mean he's not still here. But this is time for you to still be here physically and not, it's just not time for him to be here physically. And we're all eternal. So we really don't want to stay here forever, and we don't want to keep the same relationships forever. But we have an instinct to survive, and I think that's the thing that keeps us here, because if we didn't have an instinct to survive, many of us would leave. The first death, you would have just checked out. Right? You would have been like,
Right.
okay, I'm out, I'm done. Second death, definitely. Third death, you definitely would have been out. So we have an instinct, something in us helps us remember that we can go on.
And a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you're one of the strongest people I know." Like, how are you getting through it? How are you doing it? And, like I said, my brother and I used to talk about death. I'll be honest, I'm not afraid to die.
Good, me either.
I know that, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to see all my friends, and, we're going to have a big party. And it was like, even when my husband passed, he was like, look, when something happens to me, you put me in my box and you put me, I don't want no big funeral.
Mm.
I don't want somebody coming gawking at me. I'm gone.
Yeah.
And, that's what I did. And I think a lot of people were shocked by that, but I was going by what his wants were.
Yeah. And I think that the more simple, the better, in my opinion, with those of us who are still here physically, making that adjustment.
Yeah.
The more simple we let it be, the more ease we put into it. And when people say to you, how are you making it through this? I would just say, I just am, because I can. Why are you not falling apart? Because I don't have to. I can, and there were moments where I did, but I have to go on. And I think, I know for sure that those on the other side want us to go on and find our joy, to find our life. They want us to go on and be happy. I mean, for sure that Richie would never be anywhere, even on this physical planet when he was still here physically, wishing that anybody would be miserable.
Right.
Because that was not his, he wouldn't have wanted that when he was here. He certainly wouldn't want it now that he's passed. For anybody here to be miserable because he is not here physically anymore. And we all feel that way. From what they tell me on the other side, that we all want those that are still here to just find their own joy, find their love, find their life. They love it when we know that they're still a part of it. But they're okay when we don't know that too.
Kind of funny, because my son and I were talking, and he was like, Mom, there's a reason why you're still here and Dad's gone. Dad has always said that I better pass before Mom, because I don't think I would be able to survive. And that's just the way my husband was. But he says he knows that you would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and because I think that, we definitely all have it in us to make it through whatever shows up in our lives. We really do. We can not believe that, and then it doesn't look so good. But we really do. And even if somebody is going through something with no other people being a part of that, they're still not going through it alone. There's no such thing as going through anything here alone. We can think we are, but that's never actually the truth. And the more we understand that, the more we can hear the people or the souls from the bird's eye view. The more we get the encouragement, and the guidance to be able to go on. Well, Sandy, this has been a great conversation. I really think that there's a lot of honey in this that people will be able to gain from your experiences, and to see that, life can just come at you and come at you and come at you and come at you and then come again. And
right.
Come again. And it kept getting, closer to home, so to speak. But yet here you are.
Yes.
And there's your son walking around, still having another surgery, but he's still walking around because it's not his time to not be here physically. And it certainly isn't yours either. So thank you very much for today?
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you came. And to all of you out there, do the best you can to choose thoughts that just feel any sort of way better than the ones that are pulling you down. Even a little bit better is movement in the right direction, in the direction of healing and recovering from whatever comes at you, because it's not like life is throwing anything at us. This is the stuff of life. This is what we came here for.
You just got to keep going forward.
Yeah, it's how we grow. Keep going forward, keep expanding, keep learning. So you can find me at mysticaltruths.com.